All right. Check. We are live. Thank you guys all so much for being here. My name is Brendan Lowe, creator and founder of Jazz Piano School. This is going to be the live improvisation session. I'm feeling much better, but still kind of getting over things. So if I have a cough or two, just let me know. Check. Wow, that was much faster than last time. Okay. Checked all my equipment. Sounds good. Please let me know if you guys can hear me okay on your side. Really looking forward to doing this live stream. If you're new, these are some free live streams I've been doing, which I'm going to continue to do constantly. But really the true purpose of this is to promote the live programs that are starting next week. Now, back in Boston, when I grew up in New England, and a lot of the East Coast schools start the week after Labor Day, and that's exactly when my live programs start. If you're looking to work with myself in my 9-month mastermind program or my other educators in the 3-month accelerator program, get hands-on learning, master classes, customized lesson plans, you can enroll now by going to jazzpianoschool.com/group. Get more information about that. It's our highest level of learning that we offer at Jazz Piano School because it's so engaging, it's interactive, it's hands-on, very, very, very high level. Because of that, obviously, it equates to lots of progress for you, which is what we all want, right? We want to make progress and reach our goals and play the way that we imagine. So, gonna say hi to some people here. Hey, Nick. Hey, Alan. Good to see you guys. Thanks for being on here. Love seeing repeat people. Hey, Safra Charmer. Love that. Safira Charmer, excuse me. I remember you from last time too. Struggled with your name before too. But thank you guys all so much for being here. If you're just joining us or you are kind of watching, please let me know who's on here. I love seeing the students that are on here. Noel. Perfect. All right, Noel. I was saying Noel. I thought it was Noel, and I was like, is it no? No, okay. Thank you, Noel. I appreciate it. North Carolina. Hey, Bruce. Debbie, good to see you. Awesome. Long time. That's great. So if you guys got my email, I said I'm going to try and do the impossible today, which is explain my whole improvisation system to you in essentially less than 1 hour. Okay. I kind of have a hard stop around 10 because I have to get to another appointment that is starting at 12. But here we are. I'm going to dive right into this again. Go to jazzpianoschool.com/group if you haven't checked out the live programs because they're starting next week. And if you are interested in studying with me in my 9-month mastermind program, Alan was a mastermind student. Nick was an accelerator. Debbie were all accelerator students. Fantastic programs. I think they can attest to the quality of the program and the interaction that you get. Anyway, here we go. Step number 1, okay? We need to be able to display and reflect the harmonies of a chord. Now, there's 2 things in improv that you need: rhythm and notes. Rhythm and notes. Rhythm and notes. Rhythm and notes. Okay? If I take one note in the key of C, let's say, okay, I'm just going to play, let me just play bass notes. I'm going to take one note. If I play good rhythms, solid, that are swinging with one note, it's going to sound great because the rhythms are great. Dwight, how's it going? Nino, thanks for being here. 1, 2, a nice, easy tempo. Everything in my power not to play other notes. Okay? In the pocket, swinging, feels good, right? We want to start tapping. We want to start clapping. We want to start moving our body. That's because the rhythm is good. Now, rhythm and notes. If we have one without the other, okay, it's not going to sound good. Well, I shouldn't say that. I'm sorry. Rhythm is more important because clearly I just was playing one note with good rhythm. That sounded fine. Now, obviously, we need a little bit more expansion on that, but rhythm and notes is the purpose I'm getting at, the point I'm getting at. Now, let me play and add a couple other notes to this, okay? Again, I still won't be playing many notes. I'm going to use a couple blues notes. I'm going to go to the flat third and the flat 7, Maybe I'll use the 5. I'll use these 4 notes, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm still demonstrating the purpose of how important rhythm is. I'd argue it's the most important thing, right? So all of us are trying to learn more notes and language. Really should be focusing on your rhythm first. Here we go. 1, 2, 1. Hey, Rich. 2, 3, 4. What's the other thing I'm doing here too? Dynamics, right? 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And 2, 3, 4. 2. Holding notes. Okay, rhythm, right? Really makes a huge difference. So you got my picture. Rhythm's very important. Now, rhythm, it really extends. It blankets everything I'm about to teach you. It blankets every single tool I'm about to teach you. So no matter where you're at in your level, no matter what knowledge you have, what tools, what improvisational tools you have in your head, in your body, in your hands, your ability to execute these tools, rhythm is always going to play a factor, okay? Rhythm's always going to play a factor, and that's why we need good rhythm with every single tool and element that I'm going to teach you right now and walk you through. Rhythm is important for all of them. So if your rhythm's not good and you have cool notes, those notes really aren't going to sound that great. That's why rhythm really is the most important. Moving on, here we go. Step number 1, chord tones. We need chord tones to reflect the sound of the chord. Believe it or not, who would have guessed the 4 most important notes of the chord are the 4 chord tones, right, in your improv? Because you're playing the chord, because there's 4 notes. So here we go. I'm going to use just chord tones to make my solo because we need these to reflect the sound of the chord. Otherwise, if I'm not using these, it's going to sound like this. Right? It sounds all over the place because I'm not playing any notes within the chord. Here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. When we play bass notes, I just realized as I was demonstrating, I was like, these block chords aren't going to sound that great. You won't be able to hear it. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's all chord tones. That's all chord tones. Now, even for students to get to that level that I just demonstrated, it's quite hard. And the number one thing isn't the notes, because theoretically, you know that I'm just using chord tones. I have 4 notes from my pool of notes that I can use here. I have 4 notes from my pool of notes I can use here. And I have 4 notes from my pool of notes I can use here. And 4 notes here over the 6th chord, right? Now, what is the hardest part? It's the rhythm. It's the rhythm. Right? So rhythm is very difficult, and the best way to go about this is to keep things simple. That's why starting from this particular exercise is so great to make strong, fast improvements, because you're going to be working on your rhythm in a simple manner, meaning it's a controlled environment where you don't have a number of things flying at you. You're not trying to think about a billion things. You got 4 notes per chord, and you're focusing on those notes and your rhythm. Now, I would say your goal as a beginning improviser, even if you think you're an intermediate or advanced improviser, I've asked advanced students to try to do this, is to pull open a tune. This is your proficiency exam, okay? I have new upcoming proficiency tests in the most important proficiency exercises coming into Jazz Piano School this year. If you're not a member, highly recommend, well, if you're a member, you'll get access to them. But if you're not a member, I highly recommend you consider joining, because these proficiency tests are going to change the name of the game, okay, for all you guys. So if I go and open up to My Shining Hour, this is a great tune here. My goal for any tune is to be able to use chord tones in a rhythmic, engaging way and solo over the tune. Now, clearly, you guys can only see the first 4 measures. That's just the same progression almost, but here, let me expand this just a little bit. Why don't you guys just listen? You don't need to see my notes right here. Why don't you just listen? Well, I'll leave one keyboard up here. So that way you can see my hands down here, at least. But I'm just going to play through these 4, 8, 12, these 12 measures here, and just use chord tones. 1, 2, chord tones, and bass notes. So I'm just playing with chord tones through the entire song. Okay, now, if I flip tunes here and I go to Nature Boy, I have no trouble still using chord tones and playing over this tune, right? It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter what chord I see. It doesn't matter what tune I see because tunes are just chords. I'm not even worried about the melody right now. I'm not worried about the melody right now. The only thing I'm worried about is looking at the chord changes. And if I practice through all keys, then I should be able to handle any chord change I see in a tune because tunes are just chords with melodies. Tunes are just chord changes in different patterns with melodies. But the chord, you're not going to see any unexpected chord changes because there's a limited amount of chords, right? There's a limited amount of chord changes. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? Soloing just chord tones. Now, it sounds great. It probably sounds a lot better than most fancy improv that you might even hear by some students, even maybe by yourself. You're like, man, if I could just play like that, that would be awesome, right? Now, clearly, we want to get to a higher level. I understand that. But working at this is really building that strong foundation to start to throw more advanced things on top. Hey, Deborah, thanks for being here. So this is a really good place to start. Now, is it like watching paint dry when you practice this kind of stuff? Yes. Are you going to want to move on? Yes. Are you going to want to do something else? Yes. Are you going to get frustrated? Yes. Are you going to want to stop? Yes. Are you going to want to switch to other things? Yes. Are you going to be like, man, Brendan couldn't be right. He can't really think that just practicing this is going to make me better. Are you going to think that? Yes. But the thing you have to do is you have 2 voices in your head. You have the doubting voice and you have the encouraging, inspiration, confident voice. And you have to listen to my voice and the confident voice in your head. And you got to apply yourself and say, yes, I need to trust Brendan. He's a professional. He's a great teacher. This is the way that I need to go, right? I need to put my blinders on and do it, okay? When you do that, you're truly, truly going to excel really fast. I work with all my students in the programs just like that. Let's go on to step number 2. Step number 2, let's go back to my shining hour, is to connect our chord tones. And a lot of you have heard this. You've heard this information. You've heard this information. The style that I'm playing right now, the reason that we are really digging into this is because it builds into bebop. Now, if you want a modern sound or a blues sound, I'm going to tell you about that. But we're just starting. Bebop is really a really good starting point to get great at improv and become a professional improviser, okay? So we need to connect our chord tones now because everything we play sounds choppy. Now, the reason that everything sounds choppy, the reason that everything sounds choppy is that because look at the gaps. We have gaps in our notes, right? We can't possibly make a smooth, fluid sheet of ice, sheet of glass line because everything's going to be skips. If we're only playing chord tones, besides the little half step in between the 7 and the 1 here, or like the 7 and the 1 on a dominant, right? Everything's going to be skips, and that creates jagged edges. It creates hiccups, right? We do need skips, but we need a balance of skips and steps. So we need some fluidity in our lines. That's where, guess what comes into play? The word that no one likes to hear, scales and modes. Now, why do we need to learn scales and modes? How fluid was that? Like, that sounded beautiful. I love the connection and melodic movement of the steps that flow up and down. And the only thing I was doing was playing up and down a C major scale, an Ionian mode, right? This is why scales are so important. It's not because you need to learn all these weird names for the modes, Phrygian, Locrian, Lydian, Aeolian. Like, that's not important. Like, sure, they're colorings, but the real important thing is they give us a texture in improv that's so prevalent. It's so necessary to good improv, and that is the fluidity of step-by-step motion in your improv. Does that make sense? When you listen to albums, they're playing skips and steps. The steps create ease in our soul. They create fluidity. Right? How beautiful is that? Like, clearly, it sounds like melodic nursery rhymes, you know, and that's why nursery rhymes have steps, because you're moving up and down. Now, we're not playing jazz yet. I get it, but I'm at step 2. I'm using scales to connect my chord tones. I'm reflecting the chord in my sound, and I'm using smooth motion. Now, I don't want to abandon the skips, but at step 2, we're practicing. The main thing we're practicing and working on is our fluid scalar motion, right? But I do want to incorporate the skips. Right? Did you see the skips I did? Skips. Right? And then some steps to finish it out. So we want a nice balance of skips and steps. Can you guys hear how this is starting to come together to sound like jazz? Right? It's not there yet, but we're building step by step. We're using my sequential improvisational system. Now, this is taught in my improvisation specialty course inside of Jazz Piano School. If you want to work with me on this in my live programs, you can do that as well. In the the Mastermind program, I do the Mastermind program. Trent and Sterling can work with you on this in the Accelerator program. But this is how I teach. And the reason that it starts to create real fast results is because you're really building a strong foundation. Moving on. From here, we start to create jazz. Now, what I'm doing here, I was trying to overemphasize a point. I wasn't really making music. There wasn't much space. But I've now incorporated bebop approaches, okay? Into step 3 is my bebop approaches. Now, if you're looking to play bebop, if you want a solo like Bill Evans, Red Garland, Bud Powell, semi-Oscar Peterson, he's kind of blues bebop. Any of the bebop players that you might hear, Wynton Kelly, old school players, this is the step for you. Okay, is the bebop approaches. Now, if you want a modern style, like Chick and Herbie, right, like more out stuff, the bebop approaches aren't really necessary. But I do recommend learning just the basics of bebop, because all modern players start at bebop. All modern players start at bebop. Chick, Herbie, McCoy. If you listen to their older first albums, they're all playing bebop. Now, there's a reason for that, because the lineage and the history of jazz really goes through time eras and periods where bebop comes into play, and it's a major learning block in jazz education, right? And that's why players really dedicate their lives and knowledge to learning bebop. So I do recommend it. Do you need it to play modern jazz? No, because McCoy and Herbie, they're not playing that stuff. That's not bebop, right? I'm not using bebop tools. So if you guys have any questions, by the way, as I'm going through this, I know I'm going light speed, right? I'm going light speed. I'm very energetic right now. Had a good amount of coffee. Please put them in the chat, though. It's one of the reasons these live streams are so great for you all. They're free interaction with me, right? You guys can ask me questions right now on the spot. Only members can do that, or program participants, but even if there's non-members on here, you guys can interact with me and ask me questions. So please ask me questions if you have anything that's going to help your journey. So after step 2, just to cover, we got chord tones. Oh, sorry, there's more than chord tones. Step 1, chord tones. Step 2, okay, is going to be scalar motion. Now from here, we diverge into styles, and that's why I'm talking about bebop approaches versus a modern style. Now, a bebop approach is tension and release. So I'm going to explain the 2 styles now. There are 3 styles, but I'm going to explain 2 right now. I'll tell you about the 3rd in just a second. So bebop approach is going to be tension and release. When we go outside the key center, so for example, we're in the key of C. If I completely solo using diatonic modes or diatonic scales, everything's going to come from the key of C. Now the key of C, really got to fix this C natural, that's sticking on my keyboard. The key of C has 7 notes. So the only amount of notes I'm using is 7 notes in my improv for a progression that's in the key of C. In this particular case, this progression's in the key of C. When I get down to the B minor 7 to E7, right, I go into a different key, so it's going to sound a little bit different, okay? And yes, Jake, I'll get into the modern stuff in just a second. So our bebop approach is tension and release, and the tension comes from playing notes outside the key. So for example, over the C major, this E flat is outside the key. It's you know, a flat 3rd, it's a blues note, but I'm playing, I could do this as well. Right, I could go. So these surrounding bebop approach notes, also known as enclosures, also known as surround notes, all these terms you hear. I like the term bebop approach because it's creating the bebop sound. The description of a bebop approach is creating the bebop sound. That's why I call them bebop approaches, because they make your playing sound like bebop. So when you add these bebop approaches in, right, you see the D flat here? It's creating tension and release, which is what bebop is. That's bebop. It's tension and release. So we're getting a couple notes in and out of the key. Slow enough that you guys were probably able to follow along and see what notes are outside the major scale. Okay, but the first 2 steps that I taught to you all today, the chord tones and scalar motion, I'm still using. I have not abandoned that whatsoever, and it's still the primary function of everything I'm playing. If I take out the bebops, approach notes, the notes outside the key would sound like this. So now your ear should have been like, oh, I can hear how the bebop approach notes affect the sound and turn steps 1 and 2, chord tones and scalar motion, into bebop, right? It turns it into bebop. So you can't have bebop or that jazz language without steps 1 and 2. And unfortunately, students are really trying to go to like step 6 first to try to learn improv. And that's where the hang up really starts to happen, right? And this is why, like, I mean, I can clearly, if I listen to your playing, within 10 seconds, I can know exactly what you need for solo piano, for group playing, for improv, for comping, anything, because it really fits into a sequential system, just like I titled this, okay? So that's bebop. Let me take Jake's question. Modern, okay, modern improv is a different intervallic process. Jake said it sounded like fourths. Yes. Modern improv is more fourth based, right? The fourth, the sound of the fourth creates a modern sound. Now, there's other tools that creates modern sound. Just like Bebop Approaches is a tool. That's a tool you learn and practice. And if you're at that level and you want to learn bebop, you need to practice that tool to get the bebop sound. If you want a modern sound, there's other tools. Your pentatonic scale. It's all patternistic because we're using 5 notes. It's a pentatonic scale, penta meaning 5, right? And we're creating 4-note patterns out of them. This is a modern tool that creates the sound of modern jazz improvisational language. Okay, a hexatonic scale that McCoy is famous for really using and making prevalent in jazz is a 6-note scale. Now this is combined of 2 triads, which creates 6 notes, right? Triad has 3 notes, 2 triads, 6 notes. Now, McCoy would use this in 2 different ways. He would use it in switching back and forth between triads. So I'm just switching back between these F and the E flat major triad, excuse me, right? So that's a modern tool set, right? So there's different tools. Fourths, using fourths in your solo. Right? Creates a modern sound. Just like reading and writing and different types of language creates different books. You know, like authors write in a certain way. They use certain tools to express the language like in a different way, and it creates and writes a certain way, and it sounds a certain way. It's the same with jazz. Okay? Like a kid's book is using beginner-ish words, so it sounds like a kid's book. A textbook is using more textbook-like, you know, I'm not like a writing major or anything like that, but just trying to give you guys some context, right? Bruce says use half, hold, diminish on the 5 chord. Yeah. So I want to hold off on that, just Bruce, for just a second. So now we're at this crossroads between bebop and modern. So you can really go either one or the other depending upon what you want as a player, right? But bebop and modern both use steps 1 and 2 of the system I'm teaching you, chord tones and scalar motion. You need both of those, right? You need both of those to accomplish bebop, and you need steps 1 and 2 to accomplish modern. You really need both of those to do that. Now they diverge, right? Because modern has a certain set of tools and bebop has a certain set of tools, okay? And that's where your info and your education really starts to split. Now there's a third style I'm about to play for you. You're going to pick out immediately. What style was that, right? The blues. the blues. So the blues style doesn't really use modern or bebop skill sets. Doesn't use modern or bebop tools, right? The blues, if you want a blues sound, it has its own bucket of tools, its own bucket of textures that you want to learn and practice to integrate into your playing. The blues scale, right? Boom. Let me play an F because I want to stop, or let me play in B flat because I want to stop hitting the C because it's stuck. So on and so forth. So that's all blues scale. There's different types of blues scales that I teach, obviously a lot. Here's your blues scale. 1, I'm in the key of B flat, so 1, flat 3, okay, flat 4, sharp 4, I'm sorry, my bad, let me start over. 1, flat 3, 4, sharp 4, 5, flat 7, 1. 1, 1, flat 7, 5, sharp 4, 4, flat 3, 1. Okay? Now, rhythm in the blues scale is the key to making good sounding blues. I was adding lots of different types of rhythms. Right? It's still just notes. It's just the blues scale notes, but the rhythms, like I started this presentation, this masterclass with, really makes it pop. A natural I just played was the only non-blues note. So your blues demonstration has just finished, right? If you want the blues sound, Oscar Peterson, Gene Harris, some New Orleans pianists, you know, like James Booker. There's lots of blues pianists out there that play a lot of blues. I love the blues. My style, my influences was Oscar Peterson, a lot of blues stuff. I play in church. I direct music in church. I play a lot of gospel. I love the blues. So my influences of the blues come out a lot, right, in my playing. And that is, again, revolving around different types of blues scales. So if you want a different type of blues texture, you want to use your blues scale. You want to use your major 6th blues scale, changes the flat 7 to a 6, and you want to use your full major blues scale, 1, 2, flat 3, 3, 5, 6, 1. So on and so forth. All that, besides the little like effects and stuff like that I was doing, all blues scale, okay? So I'm trying to teach you how to teach yourself, right? I'm trying to teach you how to teach yourself. Now, obviously, you can make a choice on your own to go work on these things, and I hopefully you understand the process of learning jazz, right? I want you to have a clear expectation and map for learning jazz. Now, if you want more help on these topics, that's why I'm here. That's why Jazz Piano School is here. That's why the membership is here. That's why my live programs are here, because to teach yourself on your own is quite difficult. But when you walk away from these things, I want you to feel inspired, educated, empowered, and have a clear understanding of like, okay, I hear what Brendan's saying. I get it. And I can actually, there is a roadmap. Like I get the paths now because he's laying them out clearly. And I think I want to work with him a little bit more so I can understand the specific exercises and have him see my playing. Or you can try and teach yourself and do that as well, but like at least you know the path. All right, 11:33. We're going strong here, guys. If you have any questions, let me know. Moving fast. So let's talk about some other things. What happens after we split to modern or bebop? Bruce was kind of getting into this. We get into some other things. Now, I'm only talking about right hand notes and rhythm right now. Clearly, your left hand is a huge component of improv, whether you're playing solo piano or you're playing in a group. Your left hand, believe it or not, has a huge, huge role on the way your right hand sounds. I'm not getting into that just yet because there's a couple more steps before that. I'm going to get into what Bruce is saying. Now, at this point, the tools start to kind of multiply. Because I can play through a tune. Let me switch up the tune here. And I can play in a bebop style or a modern style. Come on, give me a good one. Give me a good one. Come on, come on, come on. Give me a bebop standard. My goodness. Dry spell bebop tunes here. Okay, we'll take this monk tune, for example. So this monk tune, like I can play through these changes and I can make it sound like bebop. Not that Monk was a bebop player by any means. I mean, he was and he wasn't, but like not from what we really defined bebop as, right? He had his completely own style. Brilliant. So if I played through this tune, for example, 1, 2, just the changes, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? I can make it sound like bebop. Now, the only 3 things, believe it or not, the only 3 things I'm using right now are what? The first 3 steps of what I've taught you today. I'm going to say it again. The only 3 tools that I'm using right now are the first 3 steps I've taught you: chord tones, scalar motion, and bebop approaches. Now, again, obviously, I have that mixed in with good rhythm. Good rhythm and fancy rhythms, meaning trills, right? 16th note trills. Let me scale it down. Let me scale my rhythm down for you so you can hear what just basic 8th note and quarter note rhythm might sound like. This is more like Bud Powell. Right? That's just all 8th notes. Okay, it was all 8th notes and quarter notes. Now if let me go a little bit slower. 1, 2, 1, 2, here we go. All 8th notes and quarter notes. And again, the first 3 steps that I've taught you: chord tones, scalar motion, and bebop approaches, right? That's it. Those are the 3 most powerful things, tools, jazz improvisational tools you could possibly work on to create exactly what I'm doing right there, because I'm not using anything fancy. And like Bruce said, we can get into lots and lots of theory after this, but I wanted to demonstrate what you can actually create out of those first 3 easy steps, right? Olio, rhythm changes. I could crush a rhythm, not to sound egotistical, but I could crush a rhythm changes tune without any half-whole scales, any altered scales, any fancy stuff, right? The blues scale, I don't need that. If I just play bebop approaches, chord tones, scalar motion, that's it. I'll adjust my rhythms just a little bit more. And no, let's keep it at 8th notes and quarter notes. Right? Then we get into the bridge. I got notes sticking all over the place. So again, first 3 steps right there. And my rhythms, just quarter notes, just 8th notes. Just quarter notes, just 8th notes. And for everyone that's studied with me on here, right, this is what I make my students do. That's why just quarter notes and just 8th notes, it's not a basic step by any means. It allows you to sound absolutely fantastic. When I give my students quarter notes and 8th notes, they're like, just quarter notes and 8th notes? This is what you can do with quarter notes and 8th notes, right? It's absolutely fantastic. Now, if I add in some ornamental trills, which are really, really advanced, like that takes a lot of technical proficiency to pull off. It's going to sound like this. Here we go. Right, you hear all these da ba da 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 ba da ba da ba da da. Right, I could add in 16th note runs. Those that's triplets actually. Sorry. So on and so forth. Okay, not trying to be flashy, but I'm just trying to say what level you can get to with different tool sets. Okay, you don't need all that stuff. I rarely play stuff like that ever, because really all last thing I threw in there, that was a reharm. That was a reharm. So let's get to that. You start to explore new tools. New tools. Half-whole scales. These are the tools I'm talking about that Bruce is talking about. Used half-whole diminish on 5 chords. So the half-whole. So if I play this is a great tune. If I play half-whole here on the F7 chord, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step. That's a texture. That's a tool. That is used in bebop. It's also used in modern. So you can use that tool if you practice that scale. That's a texture. It's a spice. You can use that in your playing now. So when I get to that F7, I might go. So again, I played it over the C minor 7 actually. And then resolved it back down into a chord tone of the chord. So we have all these different type of tools, and I don't need to go over all the tools in this particular thing because you can work on all the tools yourself. You can work on your altered scale. You can work on your half-whole scale. You can work on your whole tone scale. You can work on your whole half scale. You can work on all these different types of improv tools. And I'd argue that like a blues scale is a tool as well, but it creates the blues sound. So you really start to get into all these different types of tools in your right hand for different textures. Okay, this is really going to be step 4. Step 4. So you can start to add in more language at this point that brings your sound outside the key. Because before, I'm just relying on bebop approach notes to go outside the key, but now, you know, I can go outside the key by adding these scales in. Woo. Right, so altered scale. And then resolving it, however you want to do that. So all those tools start to stack on at step 4. Now, what comes after step 5? I see your question. When you approach a new song at a gig, focus on rhythm for improv. Totally. I would just focus on rhythm. Keep it simple. Don't try to do too much with the notes or like movements. Like if you have good rhythm, it's going to sound good. Simple, good rhythm is what's going to sound good. And if you're not familiar with the song, right? You really want to take a look at the chord changes because you can get away with just looking at the chord changes. And a really good tip is, are the chord changes in the key? Like, or are they moving about between different keys? So in order to do that, you need to know your chords, your 7 diatonic chords within one key. So I'll ask you this. If you know your 7, do you know your 7 diatonic chords? Not you, Dwight, but just everybody here. If you do, then you should be able to tell me if these chords in the first 8 measures are within the key of B flat or are they not? Now, if they are within the key of B flat, that means I can play all B flat over top of this. And that makes it much easier. If I just think B flat, a B flat scale. Now, again, I'm playing a lot of notes, but let me tone it down a little bit. So I'm just playing a couple notes. And I'm just going to think B flat. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, even that. I mean, it's simple, but it sounds good because my rhythms are good. Okay, so analyze the progressions, Dwight. Look to see groupings of changes that are within one key. So you really only need to think about the key center instead of thinking about B flat, G minor 7, C minor 7, F7, B flat, G, right? So on and so forth. I saw some comments by Deborah Ann, but I think they're getting deleted or something. They're disappearing. Okay, so you heard me play a reharm. So this reharms are really kind of like the next echelon to creating different types of movements in your playing. And I think reharms for the bulk of who I see here are a little bit advanced, but that's okay, right? Just knowing where the reharms lie in your improvisational journey. Not to say you need to, again, I think a lot of students get hung up on some of my words sometimes where it's like you can't move to the next level unless you have this level perfect. I'm not trying to say that, but you reach a certain level where you are trying to get reharms in, right? And things aren't coming out well, and then you're trying to add in 16th note rhythms, and you're trying to add in some modern sound, and eventually you get stuck. Like, why aren't I getting better? It's at those points you need to distill what you're playing and realize that you need to take 4 steps back probably before you actually can start to move forward further. Okay, further in your journey. Like, you need to go back and really make sure the basics, the fundamentals are rock solid. So there will come a time where you feel like you're not making progress. That's probably almost all of you. And it's usually because there's a segment, a layer that's stuck. Okay, that you don't really have down that well. But here we go. Let's talk about reharms a little bit. So I can start to throw in reharms. And these affect my solo. So I can go B flat. I'm not going to tell you what the reharms are, like kind of explain them. I'm just going to say what they are. I'm going to use a B diminished chord here into my C minor. Okay, and then I'm going to use a tritone. Right? So these reharms affect my improv, and they're going to make my improv sound different. So the why is that? Because I now have a different set of chord tones that I'm going to be soloing over, right? So if I have a different set of chord tones, I'm going to be using a different set of chord tones in my right hand. Thus, that equates to a different sound in my improv, and it sounds cool. So now I have multiple coloring options in my improv. Right? So the B7. Right? So I'll do that again. Right? So this starts to affect my right hand and the way it sounds. Now I can go further with this too, kind of add even more rhythms. On and on and on. Now, clearly, I'm just trying to demonstrate that reharms at this point, this masterclass isn't about reharms, right? So I'm not trying to teach you reharms. I'm just trying to demonstrate that at level, where are we, 4, 5, at level 5 of my system, your reharms start to really affect the sound of your playing. Reharms, different types of reharms, right? A reharm, Debbie, that's a great question. For people that don't know, is where you're changing the chords that are on the page. So Olio right here has B flat to G minor 7, C minor 7 to F7. So these reharms are theory tools that allow me to put different chord changes to the tune. So instead of going B flat, G minor, C minor, F7, those are fantastic chords. Sometimes it's jazz. I love jazz because it gives me freedom. Sometimes I want to play a diminished movement into my C minor 7, and then maybe, again, like I said, my tritone of F7, B7, maybe a 2-5 to the B, F sharp minor 7, B7, down into my B flat, maybe a 2-5 over the G minor, maybe another 2-5 leading down into my C minor, so C sharp, F sharp, C minor, F7. All right, so if I solo over that, it would be... sorry. Diminish here over the E flat minor. Instead of an E flat minor 6, I can go E flat diminished. Right? I messed up a note there, but it's okay. So our whole half, right? So you can place different types of chords through tunes when you know your reharms. Like when you know about reharms, when you're familiar with them, when you know the tools, right? Every tool in jazz is like a tool in a tool bag or a paintbrush in your cup of paintbrushes, right? To get thick textures, you need a thick paintbrush. To get a thick line on a paper, you need a thick marker. To get a thin line, you need a thin marker. Right? It's the same in jazz. So if you don't have any thin markers or you don't have any thick markers in your box of tools, you can't get that color, the texture on the painting. It's the same in jazz. To get a reharm sound, I need that tool. I need to know how to use my diminished chords or know how to use my tritones, right? Deborah Ann says, while listening to jazz, I find Duke Ellington and Count Basie play very very few piano notes compared to others. It's almost like stabbing at chords. Yeah, and that's their that's their style. You know, that's just the way they go about music. There's some super old recordings of Count Basie. I urge you to listen to them that most people aren't aware of, but he was playing back in the day, you know, super like in the Benny Moten band. This is in the 30s, 35, 40. And he's playing lots of notes. Stride. He's playing stride because back in the day, in the 20s and 30s, right, it was mainly stride and ragtime. That was the influences in jazz. He actually took over the band, and that's what became the Count Basie band. When he took over the band, I think because Benny Moten had, don't quote me on this, but had health issues. And so it's really funny, but he's playing full stride. But then he turns into, because he's running this big band, he's saying 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. That's all he's doing, right? Which is all that's needed, okay? Which brings me to my next point, musicality. Musicality is so huge, again, over all the steps that I'm teaching you right now. If you don't have musicality, what I mean by musicality is dynamics, right? Intentionality, confidence, the way you hit the note, right? A lot of my students, I'd say 99% of my students can create a better sound by just striking the piano with more confidence and more intention, like more of a drum. This is a percussive instrument. So it's really hard for me to demonstrate this. But if you go back and listen to your own playing and record it, you might notice this. So if I play like hesitant, softer touch, here's what it's going to sound like. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is so hard for me to do. Now, obviously, some things are out of time. I have legato notes in there. I had notes that were out of time, like things weren't gelling really, and it's like soft and kind of delicate and like scared and nervous, and that's okay. The first thing I want to say is that's okay. It's a natural feeling to be nervous and scared to make mistakes, but I'll tell you this right now. The more you can just say, screw it, like I'm going to make mistakes, the better your playing is going to be. Like mistakes can sound good as well with confidence, with the right rhythm. So that's why musicality and technique in attacking the note, playing your fingers more robotically like hammers, staccatos, dot, 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 right? Really, really precise, right? Dynamics using one note, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, triplet, 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 right? These are textures and motifs that really start to escalate. Now, this is really about level 7, level 8. I haven't even gotten to your left hand voicings, but your left hand obviously makes a huge difference in the sound. Like if you're not playing with your left hand, I'm accompanying myself right now in a solo piano style, but if you're not using your left hand, then it's just all right hand lines. Right? We need our left hand to support our right hand with good harmonies, good voicings, good harmonies, and these have to be in rhythm as well. And the most basic way to start out is just to play on the downbeats. With long comps, just long comps holding the rhythms. And then eventually you want to move to short comps. So your left hand is a super, super important step. But again, we're getting to really, really high levels. I do try to start to tackle and integrate all of these things, like more or less besides the tools. The tool framework should really come last. But musicality, rhythm, Dwight plays a lot of gigs. I know Dwight. He's worked with me before. Dwight, for you especially, if you're playing gigs, musicality and texture. Think about being as creative as possible, like playing in the high register. Playing one or two notes with good rhythm, right? Try to use less. Try to take on the idea or the mindset less is more. And try and go for tight textures like dynamics, octaves, registers, fun little things, space, lots of space, a little bit of space, lots of notes, a little bit of notes, right? And switch up the textures, okay? All right, guys, I'm kind of winding down here. So right now, at this point, we're getting to a really high level of professional jazz improvisation, right? A really high level, because at this level, I'm incorporating everything at a masterful level that I've taught you. So like every level of my system has been worked on, threshed out. I don't think that's the right term, but I was trying to think of something that didn't come out right, whatever. And really taken apart by me in long periods of time where I spent time on each one of these things in my journey, right? And the more, now I didn't have great focus. Trust me, I was jumping around all over the place. But eventually I did have good focus. And when I did have good focus, I made so much more progress than I ever did before. And that came after I got out of college, actually, when I was kind of working on my jazz piano school system, actually. I really dug deep into the tools and focused and put the blinders on, right? So that I was really only working on one or two things at a time and getting really good at those things. And then I'd move on. Because if we're trying to work on everything at once, it's like riding a motorcycle. It's like driving a car on the highway for the first time. There's just too many things. Like you're going to have an accident. You're going to crash, right? You got to really go slow. Go into the parking lot. Just work on lifting your brake, right? To let the car go. It's like the first thing we learn when driving a car. Just take your foot off the brake. Don't touch the gas and then put it back down, right? The car is going to move. It's going to move even if you lift your foot off the brake. You don't need gas. You do not need gas, right? To go forward. And I think that's the point I'm trying to make here is you don't need a lot of stuff to make yourself go forward, to make progress and get the sound that you want, okay? So guys, this is the last live stream I'm doing before the programs start. Obviously, next week, once the programs start, my time is going to be kind of occupied by my mastermind program. If you guys are interested in that, fantastic 9-month program that will end May of 2025. You get to work with me for all of those 9 months. There is a payment plan available if you're interested in that. Clearly, by working with me, you're going to get all the philosophies that I teach here, all of my exercises. I'll be reviewing your videos personally, listening to you play for a whole 9 months. Think about the progress that that's going to do for you, right? It is a large investment, but it is much cheaper than going to college, any college that you could ever imagine that has a music program. So I'll just say that out loud. And we have our accelerator programs available as well, which are run by Sterling and Trent. I'm not going to be doing those anymore because I really want to focus in on my mastermind students. jazzpianoschool.com/group. Thanks everyone for being here. Alan was in the mastermind program. He thought it was awesome. Thanks, Alan. I appreciate that. I will continue to do live streams though. I don't want to say I'm going, I'm like kind of like not doing it anymore. And I just do live streams to plug. I do live streams to plug my products and promotions and stuff like that. But I kind of mentioned this in a couple of live streams ago that I'm upgrading my equipment. So I'm really excited to do more live streams. For everyone, I'm going to be doing more Q&As for the members and showing them around Jazz Piano School a little bit more for different types of knowledge points, where to find things. And like I said, the proficiency release and overhaul is going to be released before the end of the year into the members area. And again, for the members area, you don't need to be, it's just a monthly fee, very cheap monthly fee to become a Jazz Piano School member. So if you are interested in that, you can do that as well. Thanks everyone. Thanks guys. Alan, Deborah, Debbie, Dwight, Jake, Bruce, Rich. Awesome, Rich. Hope you're doing well, man. It's good to see you on the live stream. I was thinking about you the other day. I was hoping that your studies were still going strong. So I don't know why you popped in my head, but you did. Some of my students just pop in my head randomly. I'm like, I hope they're doing well. Nino, Safira, Charmer, Alan. I think I said Alan already. I just want to make sure I didn't miss everyone. Awesome, Rich. Yeah, Rich says, if anyone here is on the fence about the accelerator program, I can say it completely changed my approach to playing for the better. Not a paid endorsement. Thank you, Rich. I appreciate that. So I hope you guys have a great weekend. It's Thursday. I have a bunch of guests coming over. I got a lot of things to do today. Trying to make a bordelaise sauce with bone marrow, which is going to be interesting. I have to go from an Espanol sauce to a demi-glaze to the bordelaise. 3 sauces that I reduce. Anyone cook here? I love cooking. It's like jazz, you know, because you get to throw different things in, you get to use things, you get to try, taste. Oh, I don't like that. I want to add this. I want to add this. The journey with cooking is almost the same as jazz. It's like you need to know the classics, which is what I'm working. I really love sauces. I'm working with French sauces right now, and like I really want to learn the classic main staple sauces, because what you can do with those sauces, obviously change them, tweak them, morph them into different things, different food structures, right? But you need to know the fundamentals of the French sauces in order to really start to expand outward and get other flavors. So I'm taking the same approach with my cooking that I would in jazz piano. All right, I'll see you guys. Enough about that. I could talk all day.